Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditation through the act of drawing. This week, I'm inspired by a new leaf that unfurled from the Monstera in our living room. Excited by the new light as the days grow a bit longer, the warmth as the sun heats the space it lives in, increased humidity, all leading it to invigorate its growth. And those giant leaves capturing the sunlight, but opening up pores, apertures, holes within to allow that light to pass and share with their neighbor. It's an interesting thing to watch. I thought we could bring that in here to the inspiration for the drawing. A large, undulating shape or form with a series of kind of patterned holes or apertures as a starting point to see where it might go. For this exercise, all you need is some kind of paper, sketchbook, a pen or pencil, or anything else you like to draw with, and a little bit of time for yourself to engage in an act of mindful drawing. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. All right. We'll do the warm-up just to get familiar with the idea. If you have no visual metaphor for a Monstera plant, don't worry about it. It'll be a very loose connection, but just looking at it this morning gave me some inspiration. What we'll do in the warm-up is begin by making kind of a complex undulating shape, something that wanders in and out and around, and you could use the rough idea of a leaf to guide, but it doesn't need complexity or detail unless that comes easy to the flow. It may have a start or stop or a direction, but just something with a lot of figure to it. It's border, complexity there, and we'll draw a couple of them, finding what you want to kind of engage with the movement of the pen or pencil. Sharper curves, softer curves, straighter edges, or more wiggly edges. Whichever starts to speak to your hand, speak to the movement. To distance for myself a little from the representation, the leaf creeping in. Maybe keep it a bit softer. But whatever begins to work, and those figures, when they move into the larger exercise, may also have internally some ways of forming porosity or disruption to it. Okay, now we're just finding our shape of drawing, giving our hand a little time to warm up. I'm just drawing some arbitrary circles and marks, but feeling I've kind of found a direction for my hand to move. Let's explore a few of these shapes on the larger or longer format exercise. Our hand engaged, warm. Our body's following along with it just for a couple of seconds to move the hips back and forth, move the shoulder girdle back and forth, side to side, forward and back, maybe a little up and down. Just reset that spine in a nice neutral position, supporting, present, but also out of the way. And then anywhere on a fresh sheet, new page in a sketchbook, or on the back of your warm-up, taking a breath, and then letting that first shape work its way out onto the paper, large or small, fast or slow, whatever's up to your kind of hand-eye page interface today. If you get done quickly, because it's a smaller shape, you can begin to move to another on top of or inside or behind. And I'll do a couple just layering over one another. The next is slightly hidden behind the first. Perhaps a third sneaking out, playing with size, with speed, feeling comfortable in the motion of that pen or pencil. With a little bit of layered figure establishing there. And looking into one, we'll take some time to enter our space and our breath with some smaller actions with more focus and attention. Either reflecting the influx or the outflux, whichever you feel drawn to. We'll begin with a few smaller shapes, clean or wobbly, up to you. Taking a breath in as you start. And as that breath comes out, back to the atmosphere, finding the pace of motion with it. And you may align quickly with a smoothness all the way around, an expansion of the body, and gentle relaxation of all the muscles in the rib cage and the core as the breath enters our space. Each undulation a new opportunity to form a puncture there in the larger shape, and to fill the void inside our lungs and let it collapse back. A space of oscillation, expansion and contraction. Following a pattern for my actions here, drawing at the indents, the places where any one of these undulating figures reaches back in on itself. Drawing with the breath to find a rhythm between form, between our own action, and in the expression of the drawing on the page. You can maintain clarity of overlap, or let things merge into one another, whatever you'd like to explore. But once that path is set with the breath, keeping the attention engaged on it, the exploration, part of what we bring our mindful attention to once we've entered into that space, finding a consistency of engagement, knowing from time to time we may make some mistakes in our alignment, we may run out of space to play, and we can recreate, start again, or change where our attention is. But for the time that we practice that mindful action, we bring our attention to the motion, to the way of drawing the outer shape, to the location of bringing inner dimension to the shape. As a way of mindfully connecting with our drawing experience, mindfully engaging with that establishing of space on the page that comes from the repeated action of holding presence to some degree in our awareness, following along the path to exercise our attention there in the space. But like all exercise, physical or mental, at some point we've done the repetitions, the mind or body has a development of fatigue, exertion. We need a few breaths to realign, to establish that baseline again for new action. So each piece we've assembled, the outer boundary, the inner puncturing layers, give us a chance to exercise a new piece for a little while. So as you may find your mind drift or wander, you can switch and follow a different path for a time, establishing edge, growing perimeter, establishing interiority, providing see-through, capturing a little light, and letting the mind's interpretation, the imagination, spatial awareness, pattern recognition start to develop here in the space of this drawing, this reflected moment of action. If you ever feel a little lost or rushed, or any kind of tension, we can always bring it back to our breath, breathing in to establish, and letting go with the exhalation into the space, just that curve, just that line, just that shape playing on the page. As I've established a pretty broad territory, it's beginning to fill up the zones I have to play in. I can go from the outer map to the inner map and maybe look for new relationships between the parts, connecting dots, or tracking perimeters, a chance to keep that breath moving with the curve and finding new connections in the space. Tracking along the voids established with the breath at the center of our awareness, the hands' actions blending in. As the figures and forms change size, the breath may not be one-to-one, movement to cycle, but that disalignment, a chance to bring more attention into the space of the breath, the pacing. When do you transition from the in to the out? Can that maintain evenness? with the outward flow of the drawing. Recognizing if there are moments like larger spaces or bigger curves, free territories that bring some potential holding to the breath or tension. Can we just breathe through it? Keep the pen or pencil moving through the space, tracking with our eyes and our hand. Keep the breath moving with the space of tracking. Practicing our mindfulness to that connection from within to without, and that reciprocal out motion to within. And spending just a few quiet moments with the space of your breath to find your own guidance there between hand, body, and mind. That space of quiet with emotion, and that space we're making in the porosity of the forms and the figures. You begin to find complexity, overlap, a growing challenge for the mind and the eye to track, to make some kind of sense of. And in the exercise, we can venture into that complexity for a while. Again, being mindful of fatigue that may build in that space. Not necessarily shying away, but having it in our attention for a while to know when we are losing focus, know when to shift, to replenish, perhaps just some time smoothly with our breath. Or perhaps we recognize excitement, recognition of something seen on the page, or the emergence of an imaginary, a thing to follow, to express from the initial action of creativity. Either a part of the exercise, reaching into something profound and inspiring, recognizing the work we're putting in what is a place of play and interaction, and also of development in the skills of drawing, and the techniques of connecting pen to paper, hand to eye. And more specifically in our own development of techniques of awareness to our creative action. exercising our expression through our body, through our breath, our presence here, now, given to the page, given to the medium, given to ourselves, is establishing time. And as the drawing grows in complexity, each move we make becomes more local as it knits together the more complex global. A chance to meditate on and recognize what can we hold in our presence of mind, this visual gathering of curves, lines, forms, at some point becomes too dense to track or recognize it as one. As we shift our gaze, travel around the page, we may find new engagements, new sorting as we trust our own senses to look in. As we come to the last few minutes, wherever the level of integration or cacophony may be, you find a few quiet moments to go further inward, to perhaps bring some shading, some connection, some emphasis to the layering through intensification, a retracing of parts to the pattern. Reinforcing what we let the eye track into, finding in that space just shapes and lines, potential for depth and material. And there's a couple minutes of reflection in the space that you've created wherever you are. Quiet reflection with a slower action, a looking at and through the lens of the drawing there. What do you find? Composition. I find a sense of meditation on the incremental and the repetition, the power of the first move in presence and action, the crispness, the energy of it, the reinforcing and extending of the second move, echoing shape, describing emphasis. The layers that make a drawing, a painting, any expressive act. Not just one, but the many collected actions shared. And the following of a simple idea, and to see where things might lead and what you might find. And just a few more seconds here. Continue drawing if you like. You can bring yourself slowly back into the space around, just with a bit of stretch of the hands. Maybe give a little squeeze to the fingertips. That compression, releasing some of the tension that builds from our time in action and holding presence there with the pen or pencil. The breath, the compression, as much as an expansion and a release through that tension, just to reestablish, come back into your space. I'd like to provide a little insight into my process here, and maybe it's something you can take into your own practice outside of the recorded exercises. But Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. we do this live through Mindful Prat. So that's the morning where with my journal I sit down, I look around my space, I maybe reflect on some things that have been happening, I look for places where I might need guidance or reinforcement or just release, and try to use something I find there to guide what might come through the fingertips. So there's some sketches, some little moves and maneuvers, looking at it, a feeling into the space. Eventually, maybe there's a technique that emerges or something that I think looks interesting on that paper. Perhaps I look around the room again and find something inspiring, like today's exercise, watching the sunlight captured by the Monstera, trying to put that down in drawing, trying to both reflect its properties but also abstract or distance my representation from them, just to open it up as a more accessible territory. From that, I usually have a sketch of a rough idea of where to begin. I practice a little bit. How can I walk through that? How can I break it down into our breath, our motion, our presence? And then we come to the real territory. We turn on the cameras. We start the Zoom meeting. We begin recording and drawing, working together. And the path emerges. It branches out from that original idea. The thing at the end of 25 minutes of drawing is never anywhere close to that sketch in the beginning, but it is important to take that time to doodle, to express, to have a direction of an idea. Today's exercise, while it inhabits for me many of the qualities and properties of that leaf of the Monstera, generates something new, unexpected, figural, formal, layered. It's complex. I see the passage through the foreground and background, but I also feel the uniqueness of my own imagination working through that territory established through a few minutes of mindful technique, drawing through the page. If you followed along through the exercise, I hope you find your own path to an interesting expression, something emergent, a potential for further creativity, or just a moment of expression and relaxation out there on the page to get you into the next part of your day or evening. Whatever you find, I hope it's interesting for you, and you can take these practices, share them with your friends. Give it a thumbs up below to let me know that you're engaged, maybe a comment about what you discovered along your way, and join us every week, either live through Mindful Prat on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., on Twitch at Rooks is Fun at the same time, or every Wednesday here on YouTube. I'll post new videos, new exercises, and new chances to find your own expression through mindfulness and the act of drawing. This is Rooks is Fun signing off. Draw well. Thank you.